I remember the day vividly, one of those crisp autumn mornings where the leaves had just started to turn, painting the world in hues of gold and rust. I was living in a small cottage on the outskirts of a town whose name I'll keep to myself, nestled in a place where time seemed to move a little slower than anywhere else. My name is Clara, a 38-year-old woman who had long found comfort in the simplicity of solitude. I lived in a cozy little house surrounded by a garden that was the pride of the neighborhood. While others sought the noise of social gatherings or the companionship of a partner, I found joy in nurturing my roses, their delicate petals a reflection of the peace I craved. Books, too, were my sanctuary, their pages transporting me to worlds far beyond the reach of my quiet existence. It was an ordinary morning, the kind where the soft hum of bees in the garden and the distant chirping of birds were my only companions. I had planned to spend the day pruning my rose bushes and finishing the last chapters of an enthralling mystery novel. But as fate would have it, that day was destined to break the rhythm of my predictable life. It was the day Mr. Hanson came over. His visit wasn't something I had expected, nor something I could have prepared for. The air seemed to shift the moment he stepped onto my porch, bringing with him an energy that unsettled the carefully crafted calm of my world. Little did I know, the arrival of this 60-year-old man would set into motion a series of events that would change everything. Mr. Hanson, or Henry, as he insisted I call him, was a man who carried his 60 years with a quiet grace. He had moved into the charming, ivy-covered cottage next door only a few months earlier, but his presence had already left an impression on our small, tight-knit community. A widower with kind, weathered eyes that seemed to hold the weight of both sorrow and wisdom, he had a way of drawing attention without saying much. He was always seen wearing the same hat, its frayed edges and faded color hinting at the many years it had been his companion. It seemed like a relic from a lifelong past, much like the man himself, mysterious and full of untold stories. His smile, though faint and fleeting, was the kind that made you pause. It wasn't just a polite gesture, it was a glimpse into a heart that had known deep love, loss, and perhaps a longing for something more. When Henry arrived, it was as though a fresh breeze had swept through the familiar pages of our quiet lives. The neighbors whispered about the new gentleman in town, speculating on his past, his plans, and the reasons behind his choice to settle in a place so quiet and unassuming. To me, he felt like a new chapter in an otherwise predictable story, a chapter one couldn't help but feel curious about, one that carried the scent of change and the promise of something unexpected. Our paths crossed often in the casual way neighbors do, an occasional wave across the fence, a polite smile when passing by, or a brief comment about the weather. Yet, despite the proximity of our homes, our conversations had never ventured beyond the surface. That all changed on an unremarkable morning that would soon prove to be anything but. I was kneeling in my garden, my hands deep in the soil as I worked to replant a stubborn rose bush. The rhythmic sound of birdsong and the faint rustle of leaves filled the air when a soft knock at my gate interrupted my thoughts. Looking up, I saw Henry standing there, a faint smile playing on his lips and a basket cradled in his hands. "Good morning, Clara," he greeted, his voice warm and steady, like a comforting melody. The sunlight caught the silver streaks in his hair, giving him an almost radiant appearance. "I thought I'd bring you something from my garden, some fresh apples from the old tree out back. Figured they might be good for one of your famous pies." There was an ease to the way he spoke, as though we had shared countless conversations before, even though this was our first real exchange. For a moment, I was caught off guard not just by the unexpected gesture but by the way he seemed to carry an entire world of kindness in his simple words. The basket of apples, nestled in a bed of green leaves, seemed like a small offering, but in that moment, it felt like the beginning of something much greater. I invited him in, a mixture of curiosity and gratitude warming my decision. We settled under the sprawling branches of the old oak tree in my yard, a tree that had stood steadfast through countless seasons, its leaves whispering stories of time and change. There was something poetic about sitting there with Henry, as though the tree itself had been waiting for this very moment. The conversation began easily, like water finding its way down a familiar path. As we spoke, the man behind the gentle smile began to take shape. Henry shared pieces of his life, each detail like a brushstroke on a canvas. He had been a teacher before retiring, his days filled with the joy of shaping young minds and instilling in them a love for literature. His face softened as he spoke of his years in the classroom, the countless lives he had touched, and the passion he still carried for words and stories. Then, with a quiet reverence, he spoke of Elizabeth, his wife and, by the sound of it, the great love of his life. She had passed away 5 years earlier, taken by a sudden illness that left him reeling and lost in a world that no longer felt the same. As he described her, her laughter, her kindness, the way she made their house a home, it was clear that his heart was still full of love for her, love that now had no place to go. His words were laced with sorrow but also with a deep, unshakable gratitude for the years they had shared. I listened intently, captivated by the vulnerability in his voice. Henry wasn't just a neighbor anymore, he was a man with a story, one of love, loss, and resilience. And as we sat beneath the oak tree, I realized that this conversation wasn't just about learning his story, it was about finding the threads that connected our lives in ways I hadn't yet imagined. Our conversation meandered like a gentle stream, flowing effortlessly from books to gardening, touching on the small joys of life that we both seemed to treasure. We laughed at shared observations, exchanged stories, and even embraced the silences that followed. In those quiet moments, it felt as though the world itself had paused to listen, the rustling leaves above us whispering secrets only the old oak tree could understand. It was during one of these silences that Henry turned to me, his eyes soft with an almost unspoken wisdom. "Clara," he said, his voice low and steady, "life has taught me to cherish moments like these. They're the ones that truly matter, the quiet, the connection, the peace." His words settled over me like a warm blanket, simple yet profound, as though he had given voice to something I had always known but never fully realized. The day unfolded gently, stretching into something more meaningful than I could have anticipated. Henry stayed to help in the garden, rolling up his sleeves and working alongside me. His hands, though weathered and marked by time, moved with a precision and care that revealed a lifetime of familiarity with the soil. Together, we planted bulbs for the spring, our laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves and the hum of bees. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, I found myself marveling at the ease of it all. It was rare to meet someone who saw the beauty in the simple things, the feel of the earth in your hands, the promise of new blooms, the shared satisfaction of a job well done. In Henry, I saw not just a kindred spirit but a reminder that even the smallest moments, when shared with the right person, could carry the weight of something extraordinary. "I've seen much in my time, Clara, but nothing compares to the beauty of a simple day spent well," Henry said, his voice soft and reflective, as if each word carried the weight of a memory he was carefully revisiting. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the golden light of the setting sun seemed to blur the lines between past and present. As the day gave way to evening, we slowly made our way back to my cottage, the air growing cooler but no less comforting. I offered to make us some tea, and soon the kettle's gentle whistle filled the quiet kitchen. The aroma of chamomile wafted through the room, mingling with the warm glow of the overhead light. We sat at the small wooden table, our mugs steaming in our hands. There, in that unassuming space, surrounded by the familiar comforts of home, I began to see Henry in a way I hadn't before. He wasn't just my neighbor or the widower next door. He was a man who, despite the chapters of loss and solitude in his life, still carried a yearning for connection. As he spoke, his voice took on a softer, more vulnerable tone, revealing pieces of himself he hadn't shared before. He spoke of his late wife with a reverence that made the room feel sacred, of his love for literature and the joy he found in teaching, and even of the dreams he still carried, quietly tucked away like keepsakes. In those moments, Henry wasn't a man defined by his past, he was someone who still had love to give, stories to tell, and a heart that hadn't forgotten how to hope. And as I listened, sipping my tea, I realized that what had begun as a simple day was transforming into something far more meaningful, a reminder that even in the quiet corners of life, profound connections could bloom when least expected. From where he sat, Henry turned to me with a playful glint in his eye, his expression carrying a hint of mischief that caught me off guard. His smile widened as he leaned in slightly and asked, "Clara, why don't we make today a little more fun? Why not enjoy ourselves?" Before I could respond, he reached over and gently tickled my side, catching me completely by surprise. A burst of laughter escaped my lips, breaking the calm of the room like a sudden gust of wind. "Henry!" I exclaimed, trying to squirm away, but his playful spirit was contagious. The air between us shifted, lightened by the unexpected moment of joy. Laughter filled the space, echoing off the walls and mingling with the fading light of the evening. It was such a simple, silly gesture, but it carried a warmth that lingered, wrapping itself around the moment and turning it into something unforgettable. For a man who often carried the weight of his years and memories, Henry had an uncanny ability to bring levity, to remind me that life wasn't just about the quiet reflections but also about the small, unexpected joys that made it all worthwhile. I hesitated at first, the words no forming on the tip of my tongue. But something about the way Henry looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of playfulness and sincerity, made me pause. Before I could think twice, I found myself agreeing, a soft laugh escaping as I nodded. Without warning, he scooped me up effortlessly, his arms strong and steady. For a man of 60, Henry carried an energy that defied his years. There was a vitality in him, a spark that seemed to light up the moment and catch me completely off guard. I couldn't help but laugh, the unexpectedness of it all filling me with a giddy kind of joy. "Henry, put me down," I protested, though my words lacked conviction. He grinned, his expression triumphant, as if he had just proven a point about age being no match for spirit. It was in that moment I realized there was so much more to Henry than his quiet demeanor and gentle ways. Beneath the surface was a man who still embraced life with enthusiasm, who could remind me, even in the simplest of moments, how to let go and just enjoy the ride. He lifted me up with surprising ease, his laughter ringing out as he twirled me around. There was a childlike joy in his eyes, a mischievous spark that made the moment feel utterly carefree. We laughed together, the sound of our shared amusement filling the space between us like music. As we played, it wasn't just the physical fun that made it special, it was the lightness in the air, the absence of any heavy thoughts or worries. We teased each other, exchanging playful jabs and light-hearted games that made us both forget the world outside. I could feel the warmth of the moment, the kind of joy that comes not from grand gestures, but from the simplest of connections. For a few minutes, we were just two people, not bound by age or circumstance, but caught up in the sheer delight of the present. Every laugh, every playful move, made me realize how rare and beautiful it was to share such an unguarded moment with someone. It was a kind of joy that reminded me of the power of simplicity, of finding happiness in the smallest of moments. The energy between us was palpable, as if the playful games had given us both a burst of life, like we had just finished a fun and invigorating workout together. There was a warm, easy satisfaction in the air, and I found myself smiling, feeling both giddy and content. It was as if the boundaries that had once existed between us were slowly fading, and we were simply two people enjoying each other's company in the most carefree way. "How about you go take a bath and freshen up?" I suggested, my voice light with amusement. "I'll do the same, and then we can move to the bedroom, where we can finally relax and enjoy the fun we've both been craving." Henry raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the playful tone in my voice, and his smile widened with a touch of mischief. It was as if we were both caught in the excitement of the moment, no longer concerned with anything else but each other's presence. There was something in his eyes, a kind of quiet understanding, that made my heart race just a little. "Sounds perfect," he said, his voice low and filled with anticipation. His words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, filled with promise, before we both moved to our separate rooms. As I made my way to the bathroom, I couldn't help but reflect on the day. What had started as an ordinary afternoon had somehow turned into something far more intimate, more connected than I had ever expected. It wasn't just the playfulness or the light-heartedness that made it special, but the way we had begun to share a space, physically, emotionally, and mentally. As the warm water cascaded over me in the shower, I found myself feeling more relaxed, but also more aware of the growing connection between us. There was a quiet anticipation building inside me, a mix of excitement and curiosity about what the next step would bring. Would we simply continue enjoying each other's company, or was this the beginning of something deeper, something that went beyond the surface of our easy banter and playful moments? Once I finished, I took a moment to dry off and slip into something comfortable, my thoughts swirling with the energy of the day. When I walked out of the bathroom, I could hear Henry's footsteps in the other room, the sound of him preparing in his own way. In that quiet moment, everything around us seemed to vanish, leaving only the profound connection we had somehow found between us. No longer were we just two neighbors passing through life, each quietly following our separate paths. We were something more, something deeper, a bond formed from a chance encounter, now turned into something that felt rare and almost mystical. It was as if, in the simplest of ways, we had discovered something extraordinary. Two souls, once strangers, now linked in a way that transcended the ordinary flow of time. As we moved toward the bedroom, I could feel the air thick with a sense of warmth and anticipation. There was a kind of electric energy in the space between us, something that vibrated with the unspoken understanding we had shared over the course of the day. It felt like the universe was whispering a quiet reminder to us both. Sometimes the most beautiful, most significant moments in life are the ones that come when you least expect them. The ordinary, the mundane, the day-to-day, all of it had led to this beautiful, unexpected moment, and it was as if the universe had been nudging us along, coaxing us to this point. As we stepped into the room, I found myself overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. The room, once simply a space, now felt like a sacred place where time slowed down, allowing us to experience this connection in its purest form. What took me by surprise was how Henry's presence seemed to fill the space with a warmth that went beyond the physical. His energy was calming yet electric, his touch gentle but assured. I had expected a certain level of tenderness, but there was so much more to it than that. Henry moved with a quiet confidence, every gesture thoughtful and deliberate, and with each movement, I was reminded of the depth of his experience and the wisdom he had gained throughout his life. It wasn't just physical, it was an emotional awareness that seemed to guide every step of the way. He made me feel at ease in a way I hadn't expected, as if he was aware of every subtle nuance of the moment, how to make me feel both cherished and free, relaxed and alive all at once. His hands, though weathered by time, moved with a softness and skill that spoke volumes about the care he had given to every aspect of his life. There was a tenderness to his touch that seemed to make every moment feel precious. He was not rushed, not concerned with anything beyond us, this rare, beautiful exchange we were having. With each touch, I realized that it wasn't just the physical closeness that mattered. It was the way he made me feel, how he seemed to understand exactly how to bring me joy, how to make me feel seen, understood, and completely at ease. In that moment, I wasn't just in the presence of a man who had lived a full life. I was experiencing something far more profound. It wasn't about what we were doing, it was about how we were doing it. The connection between us deepened with every breath, every shared glance, and I found myself lost in the intimacy of the moment. I could feel my heart racing, but not out of nervousness or hesitation. It was the thrill of something new, of something beautiful unfolding in a way I hadn't anticipated. And as we moved together, it became clear that what had started as an innocent, playful afternoon had blossomed into something much more significant. It was as though we were dancing to a rhythm that only we could hear, caught up in the magic of a connection that had formed effortlessly but was anything but ordinary. Each movement, each shared laugh, each pause to simply be in the moment, it all felt like a beautiful, intricate dance that we were sharing. I realized, then, that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most profound experiences. This connection between us, born from something so simple, had transformed into something both deeply meaningful and exhilarating. And as we continued to move together in harmony, I knew that this moment was just the beginning of something even more beautiful than I could have imagined. The unexpected beauty of it all was not just in the act, but in the way we had discovered something rare, something timeless, together. When it was over, Henry lay beside me, his breathing slow and steady, and for a moment, the room was filled with an almost surreal calm. It was as if time had suspended itself, and we were both wrapped in the quiet comfort of the night, each of us feeling a profound sense of contentment that only moments like these could bring. He slept soundly, like a baby, his face softened with the peace that comes from knowing you've shared something meaningful, something real. It wasn't just the physical closeness, but the deep, unspoken connection we had forged in those few hours. I watched him for a while, his steady breathing a gentle rhythm in the otherwise silent room, and in that moment, I realized just how rare and beautiful this bond had become. From then on, things changed between us. What had started as a simple meeting in the garden, a neighborly exchange, had blossomed into something much more frequent and intimate. We began seeing each other more often, our encounters moving beyond the occasional polite conversation. It was as if we had both discovered a shared space between us, one filled with comfort, understanding, and something deeper that neither of us had expected. Henry made it clear, in his quiet, unassuming way, that he enjoyed our time together more than any companionship he had known in years. "I haven't felt this way in a long time, Clara," he confessed one evening, his voice low but steady. "You bring something into my life I didn't even know I was missing. I never expected to find this kind of joy again, but here you are, making me feel more alive than I have in ages." It wasn't about the physical moments, though they were part of it. What mattered more was the way he looked at me, like I was someone who truly mattered to him, someone he could confide in, someone whose presence brought him peace. We would spend hours together, whether it was in the garden, talking about our favorite books, or just sitting quietly in each other's company. There was no rush, no need for anything more than the moment itself. It was a beautiful simplicity that I hadn't realized I craved. And in return, I found myself drawn to him in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just his kindness or the way he made me feel, though those were both powerful. It was the way he made me appreciate life in a way I hadn't in a long time. His wisdom, his gentle nature, and his ability to truly listen were qualities I cherished more with every passing day. We became more than just neighbors, we became companions, confidants, and friends. Each meeting felt like a new chapter in a story neither of us had planned, but both of us were eager to explore. With Henry, I felt like I was discovering a part of myself I had long forgotten. He was not just a man I had come to know, he was a man who had become a significant part of my life in ways that were quiet yet profound. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of stillness between us, added depth to a connection that seemed to grow stronger with time. Henry's admission that he enjoyed my company more than any lady he had known didn't just make me smile, it made me realize that, in each other, we had found something unexpected and irreplaceable. We had stumbled upon a connection that neither of us had anticipated, but now that it was here, neither of us wanted to let go. And so, we continued to meet, continuing to share in those quiet, powerful moments that only we could understand.